we'll just throw it all in one bag because it's easier that way. And in America, you've tried, what are they called, like mixed waste MRFs, material recovery facilities, where people can throw the paper in with the whatever and the whatever and the whatever. What happens is that the grade of, or the quality of the paper is so low after it gets contaminated with grease or oil or Coca-Cola or whatever, that it can't be recycled. And so it really takes value out of the system. We really do need at this point for people to separate out stuff to make these programs successful, and that's hard. I don't know why this graphic keeps doing this, but anyway, reduce, reuse, recycle. I like to talk about personal carbon footprint at some point in this presentation. So I think that we tend to, and probably not you guys, focus all our efforts on recycling. And you have to realize that reduce, reuse, recycle is way down there because it has a pretty high carbon footprint. The energy that you have to throw into a Coke can, why do I keep picking on Coke? A soda can, in order to turn it back into sheet metal, to turn it back into a new can is huge, right? So really our biggest weapon is waste reduction. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't have to consume anything. It's great if you don't want to. But the world economy right now, unfortunately, is measured by what? Consumer spending, right? So we have to think about what the current economic model is and what we're doing, unless we're going to change that economic model, which that would be a conversation for another day, and people who might be slightly smarter than me. But we've always measured our economy, our economic health on consumer spending. So we have to keep people spending to a certain extent, but we want them consuming things that don't have high waste amounts, right? More markets where you can just go and put all your stuff in a cloth bag or whatever, that kind of thing, right? So waste reduction, waste reuse, obviously having more reusable things, recycling, and then energy recovery, which is where we are here down at the bottom. But still a green thing that does help with your carbon footprint, but these are all, anyway, things to think about. All right, so it's a team effort, guys. Governments can't act alone. Like I said, we can build all these facilities, but unless people are going to actually separate things out to make it work, you guys can't act alone. Corporations can't act alone, although I really kind of question that now, because I think that some of the biggest manufacturers in the world could make massive changes and have huge impacts almost overnight. For example, Coke and Pepsi, and I used to work for Keep Bermuda Beautiful here in Bermuda. And we were pushing for a bottle bill. And the local Coke and Pepsi importers brought in American lobbyists. I mean, how can I go up against somebody who professionally does that stuff, you know, as a person who has no real experience in that arena? So, of course, we didn't get a bottle bill, right? They spend, the data that I looked at the time is that Coke and Pepsi spend more money every year lobbying against bottle bills, right? I mean, then is spent lobbying for them, because you've got these grassroots organizations trying to lobby for bottle bills. You have a bottle bill in Maine, right? Yeah. How successful is it, do you guys know? Do you know what your recovery rate is?
I find there's nowhere near as many cans on the side of the road.
Yeah.
I always go looking in the springtime, because stuff that gets thrown away gets covered by snow.
That's true, yeah.
And then there's a lot, but people tend to go out and pick it up because it's a little source of income.
Source of income, right? Yeah.
I don't know if you all know, you probably do, but we pay a nickel for everything that's in a bottle except the milk.
Is it still 5 cents?
Yeah, 5 cents. Wine and liquor is 50.
Yeah.
I got a $1 back after last year. $1.15 after my whole year at school. It was crazy.
$1.15.
Yeah, that's how much I had recovered after.
That's really pretty.
I go around after parties and I grab all the cans. We have like a huge bag sitting in our apartment.
Yeah. So, I mean, okay, you guys are poor college students, excuse me for saying that, right? So one of the arguments that they used here was Bermuda's too affluent, and that would never work here. No one's going to pick it up. We have homeless people. I'm not posting about that, but we do have homeless people here. We do have people who, are below the poverty line, and I think it could make a difference. Anyway, it's just amazing to me that companies like that will spend their time and effort doing things like that, just like the oil companies have been in denial about global warming, just like plastic companies knew that plastics weren't recyclable back in the 70s, yet they allowed the nonsense to persist for 50 years now, right? The little Mobius loop, the recycling loop, putting that on a number 5 plastic, what does that mean? Nothing, right? Number 6, number 7, number 3. It's really 1s and 2s, and they're only downcycled, right? They cannot be converted back into clear plastics for uses in other water bottles. So, you know, there's a lot of just that kind of crap going on. So I'm gonna maybe take that corporate thing out there.
What were you proposing that bottle to look like?
Okay, so this would have been like 30 years ago when I was working at KBB, and it would have been, you know, a stipend to recycle cans or glass, basically, yeah.
So in Sweden they have these machines at the
Reverse
supermarket
vending
where you
machine,
come
yeah.
and you're
We
like,
didn't have, they weren't around when we had that conversation, but yes. But that's another issue. So the grocery stores here, like, we don't want your dirty bottles in our store. You know, so but yes, the reverse vending machines are great. Do they have reverse vending machines in America now? Yeah. Everywhere, or? And so the other thing is, guys, okay, so one of the best recycling programs is in Canada, and I mean, I haven't looked for a few years now, but all of their beers, the locally produced beers, you've got Molson, Labatt's, and I can't remember what the other, there's 3 major beer producers in Canada. And they all use the long neck brown bottles. And so and I think all the liquor stores are also state run in Canada as well. So when you take your recycling back, and it doesn't matter whether it's Labatt's, Molson, whatever, it just gets put in a crate and it goes back to one of them. They get sterilized, they get a new label on it. That's one of the most perfect systems. One of the problems or challenges is when you go, and this is where design and engineering, marketing, all that stuff come into play, when you go and you stand in front of the drinks cabinet at a liquor store, or not even liquor store, just in the grocery store, and look at all the different bottle designs. And it's like, how does that all work? You know, everyone wants to have this unique look, but the problem is that makes it very difficult for a refill system like the one they have in Canada. So, you know, that's another challenge, right? Why can't everybody just use the same kind of bottle? You can have clear ones for non-alcoholic beverages, green ones for alcoholic beverages to a certain level, and brown ones for, you know, off the chart liquor or something like that, right? You know, why do we have to just make the label the thing that distinguishes it? Why, if we had that, then we could have bottle sterilization programs like they have in Canada that really make it work. So I'm curious. I think in Sweden they do a lot of waste energy, because so I'm just curious as to what happens with a lot of that stuff that is diverted.
Turn the PET bottles back into PET bottles?
No, you can't. You can't turn PET bottles back into PET bottles. Not that I'm aware of. Are you sure?
Yeah.
Unless it's been. I'd like to see some papers on that. Last time I looked, you couldn't.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll have to send it to you.
Yeah.
That
Do you know?
That's always been like my impression, even since.
No.
So they got the P.
No, plastics are downcycled, they're not recycled, which means basically they are shredded, melted down, and made into firmer grades of plastic, usually number 7.
Okay.
Yeah. So you'll get things like fleece fabric, carpeting. I have a plastic clipboard that's made out of recycled plastic. That compost bin that you have, that's made out of. But no, you can't. It's not like aluminum where you're just melting it down and turning back into sheet aluminum or steel. It's not like that for plastic, but that is what a lot of people believe.
Yeah.
And that's what's always intriguing to me. So if we were to have a bottle bill in Bermuda, and as you've seen over the years, I showed you that we've had this 40% increase in plastic. So now a lot less of your litter stream along the roadside is glass or aluminum. A lot of it is plastic. Do we still put a bounty, because that's what a bottle bill is, right? A bounty on those plastic, non-recyclable things, knowing that they're going to end up here being recovered for energy. So you need to be careful, because I think it's still doable, but I think you need to be careful with managing the public's perception and telling them that that's not why you're putting a bounty on those bottles, that they're not going to be recycled, that they are going into an energy recovery facility. So I think it would be interesting to learn more about what they're doing in Sweden. But my impression is that no plastics at this point are melted down and turned back into PET. That's my impression from what I've read. But you know, I try and stay on top of things, but you know, it's like everything else. It's pretty evolves pretty quickly. So yeah. All right. So team effort, right? Go team. Anyway, sorry, I didn't take up too much long. Any questions, guys? Gosh.
I'm curious about the
Yes.
the composting.
Yes.
Because that's
Yeah,
what we've started doing as a family. And we've
Okay,
got our
good.
compost like in the garden. But I don't see that much of it. So I'm
Okay.
kind of curious as to, I guess the question I sent on Friday was around like food bin collection.
Yes.
Which has become, in Sweden they incentivize, you get a reduction basically on your council tax
Right.
bill if you choose to
Yeah.
to put your food into a special food waste bin
Right.
that gets collected separately. And in the UK, more and more councils are now doing it. So my mother-in-law,
Yeah.
they have to, well, they should be doing it.
Yeah. No, it's good. Yeah.
And so I was wondering if that's ever come up as an opportunity to get more residential food waste into the compost.
I think it's a good idea, but I think it'd also be very expensive here. We don't have the same kind of council tax system that you have in the UK, which I'm very familiar with, and I think that's wonderful. We do have parish councils here, but they're not involved in any of the taxation or whatever. I don't actually know what they do here. They're not very vocal. So I don't know. It's a wonderful idea, and we have talked to Marsh Valley about possibly accepting food waste like that for people who don't want to compost at home. So it's something that we should probably work towards. Yeah. But yeah.
I mean, I don't know what works well with the incentives, because I've also read when you said, I don't know what the alternative world order could look like if we wanted to change.
Yes,
There's a really
yes.
interesting book called Donut Economics, which I can recommend for anyone to read.
Donut economics?
Donut Economics.
Okay, yeah.
It's an English professor at Oxford University called Kate Raworth, who writes a lot about like what the alternative world order could look like, and she's got some very interesting solutions. And her book's called Donut Economics. One of the things she says though is that often in communities where they suddenly introduce a financial incentive,
Yes.
they actually see participation decline. So once
Okay.
it becomes
Really?
like,
That's interesting.
once
You
it
guys
doesn't-
hearing that? Huh.
once
Okay.
it isn't, once you're not doing it because you're bought into it, intrinsically, and because you believe it's the right thing for you and for your family and for
Right.
your community to do,
Sure.
then actually you start to get like the black market, and you start to get like you start to see people participate less.
Interesting.
So
So
I
their
don't
heart
know.
and soul
I don't
is
know if
so
that's-
money is not a motivator for people.
Is her theory.
Yeah.
But then I guess in places like Sweden, they have decided that actually
Mhm.
the end result is still that they're getting a bigger participation by doing that. So I
Yeah.
don't really know whether
Well, I
what
think
would be the
that
right thing in
I think this is a
Bermuda.
good conversation for the whole sort of framework of sustainability, because again, what we work in one country in terms of financial motivation may not work in another country. You know, I think you're absolutely right. So, and I think it is going to have to be a community by community solution in terms of how to motivate people to do things like that. Yeah,
Because it's
absolutely.
like 20% of the 17% of the food,
Yeah.
the sort of like basket, you know, when you do the waste audit, it feels
Yeah.
like a big, well, not necessarily opportunity, but a potential opportunity for.
I think, yeah, I mean, I have to say that I think we're pretty good in terms of food waste. The 17% that we see here is lower than the US, which is about 25%, and the same with the UK, about 24%. I've always said it's because we're a nation of soup makers, and also food is expensive here, so it is less. What would be good for me to be able to do, and it just comes down to time. I have a week to do it, and I have students who help me with it. What would be really good to do is to be able to take all the food waste at the end of every day and separate out, like just compile it while we're doing the audit, And then be able to pick out things like those, because that's not, I mean, at the end of the day, it's not waste. I mean, it is waste, but it is a separate, it's not food waste. It is waste from food, but it's not the same as a whole head of lettuce or a bunch of asparagus that didn't get eaten or something like that. It has a different value, if you like. So you had a question as well?
Oh yeah, I was just wondering if there's any, the composting systems, are they going back into the environment? Do you have any like agreements with, say, landscaping companies?
Oh,
or
we
is
do,
it
yeah,
going off-
absolutely. Yes. Okay, so the question was about the composting. So we compost a huge amount, and as I think you've seen it down there, we talked about that. Because we're an island nation and it's winter right now and everything is still green, we have huge amounts of compostable material at all times, horticultural. And the addition of food waste, as Martina has mentioned, actually would make a better grade of compost if we were able to add household waste into that waste stream. And so there have been conversations about that. And in the past, we were getting food waste from the cruise ships, but that was a decision based on the environmental authority here, who decided that we shouldn't accept food waste from cruise ships because it hadn't been inspected. And there was potential of fungus, microbes, things like that. So as an island jurisdiction, we do have to be really careful about what's brought in here. For example, back in the 1930s, we had a massive blight that wiped out 75% of our native forests, right? So, you know, people, it's a difficult one. Food waste from the cruise ships was fantastic. So going back to your question was, do we have a lot of use for it? Not as much as we would like to see. We don't charge for it, and I think that might be part of the problem. I think we should charge for it, because when people perceive that there's a value, I think that they would be more inclined to get it. But yeah, it's good stuff. We did get it tested for things like cadmium, lead, mercury, and all that sort of stuff, just to make sure it's safe, and it's fine. It exceeds the standards that have been set for it, which is the AAA US compost grade, whatever. But yeah, landscapers do use it and stuff, but not enough. I mean, yeah, it's a good idea though. Yeah, but it could be better with food waste in there. We just have to figure out how to get it in there.
What does a professional, like a commercial compost look like?
Oh.
Is there like a specific machine for it?
No, okay, well there are different ways to do commercial composting. So there's what's called an in-vessel composting unit, and basically that's a conveyor belt system, and it just dries the food waste, and it goes through this sort of very long room. And I think it's like, I don't know, 2-3 week process maybe, and you get compost at the end of that. So that's called an in-vessel composter. I don't know that much about it, but I know Disney World has one. That's kind of cool, right? Anyway, yeah, they do for all food waste that gets produced there. For what we do here is called windrow composting. So they just create these giant 20-foot row, 20-foot long rows that are, I don't know how high, 10 feet or so high, and they're mechanically turned by you know, bulldozers, things like that. And the internal temperatures are measured. They have to reach a certain standard for a certain temperature for a certain number of days to make sure that you are getting your composting action going on there. So I think at any given time, there's probably about 30 windrows down there. And they can add food waste, I mean, if it's available. That's the thing, it's just not. In-vessel composting is interesting, but it would cost money to build a facility like that. So anyhow, anybody else? I think Miss Zoe's chomping at the bit, ready to go.
Well, I don't know how much time.
Yeah, how much time do you guys have? I probably,
We're okay.
Easy.
sky's the limit, as long as you can keep your eyes open. Okay.
We've been going pretty fast and hard. They've been getting up early and
Goodness.
staying up late, so
Oh,
it's pretty intense.
you thought you were coming to Bermuda to go sunbathing, didn't you?
All right, so I will go through the, I guess sort of like the engineering side of the waste to energy plant. And some of it overlaps with what Denise has discussed. So officially we are the Tynes Bay Waste to Energy Facility, but a lot of people just call us the dump or the Incinerator, and all sorts of other names. And even though we've been in operation for 28 years now, a lot of people still don't realize that we are actually creating energy from the waste that comes through the facility. So our two main objectives are to reduce the volume of garbage that comes into the plant, and the byproduct of that combustion process obviously is ash, and we create concrete ash blocks with the ash that's left over. And our second objective is to produce electrical power, of which we use internally, and whatever's left over we actually export to Belco, which is the one and only power supply company that we have on the island. So the first objective begins with the collection of refuse. So as Venice went over, we receive household garbage and commercial waste. And so that includes a lot of wood waste, pallets, because obviously everything, well, 99% of our stuff is imported, and it's all on these wooden pallets. The wooden pallets can't be exported back to the States. The States don't want to receive them because, again, the wood could contain, whatever stuff in it that they could perceive as a threat. So all of that comes here to be burnt, as well as, cardboard, packaging, construction. So the rubble, inert rubble, goes to the airport, and heavy PVC plastics goes to the airport for landfill, but everything else comes to us. And then we also talked about the public drop-off as well, so that's open 7 days a week, so we can receive all sorts of household waste from that facility as well as hazardous waste, which gets separated out and goes to other facilities. So when you guys were outside on the driveway, you saw that the trucks come down the hill. Everyone stops on this weigh bridge, and everything gets weighed and it's categorized. So is it household waste? Is it commercial waste? Is it just wood? Etc., etc. So we can keep track of everything that comes through. Last year, so 2022, we actually received just over 64,000 tons of waste came through the facility, which is actually down over the last few years. We can always tie the amount of waste that's coming in with the economy. When the economy is sort of like on a downward spiral, we get less and less waste coming in. And then obviously during COVID, there was far less visitors on the island. A lot of expats actually decided to leave and go home, so the population was far less.
The restaurants were closed.
Yeah, restaurants were closed, you name it. We did actually think that household garbage would increase, but it didn't. It was just the glass, just the drinking.
And food
Which is
waste
interesting.
in the UK reduced quite significantly during COVID, but it's back to normal now. Because with people being home, they just manage
Home cooking,
their
yeah.
fridge,
Less,
their
yeah,
fridge food
exactly.
better and waste it less.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So once the trucks leave the weighbridge, they enter the tipping hall, which I think you guys had a look out the window, which is our tipping hall there. Once the trucks go in there, things are sorted out. The majority of waste goes straight into that bunker, which you guys could see from the window. But then we also have a bulky waste shear, which chops up all of those large wooden items. So as you can imagine, household waste is fairly wet, and wet stuff doesn't burn that well. So we need to have this dry material mixed in with that household garbage in order to get some good combustion. So we have the shear that does that. The large metal items are removed, and that all goes down to the airport for landfilling. Obviously, we don't want to burn any metal items within our system. Number one, they don't burn very well and they cause a lot of issues. And second of all, obviously the materials that they contain, we don't want coming out of the stack. So the refuse bunker is about 65 foot deep. So from the bottom to the top is probably about 3 weeks worth of garbage. So generally, we are burning waste. We have 2 streams, and we're burning waste 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it's generally 2 streams that are on at all times. At the moment, we have 1 stream down for some major work. So we just have the 1 stream running. So we're hoping that we stay on top of the waste coming in, so we don't end up overflowing and having to enact our contingency plan. So you guys saw the big grab or the big claw, which is just like the one in Toy Story. Basically picks up 3 tons of waste at a time. And you'll see when you look out the window, they'll pick up a grab and kind of move it along, and then dump it, and then mix up waste as they go along. And that's just, again, mixing all the waste up in order to get good combustion. But once they pick up a grab of waste, that gets put directly into the furnace or the feed chute, and from there it travels down into the furnace where it's ignited by the trash that's already on fire in there. So that could take up to about 15 to 30 minutes depending on how fast we're running the grates. So if you look over here,